It's time that the truth be told about Greece, and it is a great pleasure for me to welcome Andreas Koutras to Sprott Market Insights. Now, Andreas is an expert in the European peripheral debt crisis and in particular Greece. He has worked in many banks, including Lehman Brothers, Bank of Montreal, Royal Bank of Canada, and Crédit Agricole. His background is in astrophysics and mathematics, where he got his PhD. Welcome, Andreas, to Sprott Market Insights.
It's a great pleasure.
And Kalispera.
Kalispera.
Andreas, you're eminently well qualified to enlighten us on the Greek tragedy because you know where the bodies, or some of the bodies, are buried. To start off with, could you give us some historical perspective on your country?
That's right. Let me just give you a really brief history of Greece. The country was established, modern Greece, and I'm always talking about modern Greece, the state, not anything historical, ancient, or anything like that. The modern country was established in 1832. Now, you'll find it amusing that we took our first loan in 1825. That's 7 years before the country was established. And we defaulted on that loan 2 years later in 1827. And for most of the first 50 or 60 years, Greece remained under default. So it was a country that, even before it was incorporated, was in default and stayed in default for about 60 years. So that will give you a good idea. But what happened is that Greece was incorporated out of the old Ottoman Empire. Now, what this means is that the modern Greece never had the pleasures of Renaissance, Reformation, land ownership, ruling aristocracy, state institutions, state infrastructures, roads, schools, or the continuation of a state. It was actually carved. They carved out a piece of land and they said, this is the modern Greece. Now, when Greece was created, obviously you have to create your own myths, and you have to actually establish some continuity with Plato and Socrates. And of course, you have to clean the language in order to make it sort of more uniform state. So it's a funny thing, but modern Greece was created out of all this mess. And the borders of Greece have changed about 8 times since then. We had about 2 civil wars, 5 wars, 1 German occupation, 3 major out immigrations, including one in Canada, 1 mass refugee, and even though we are the cradle of democracy, let's put it this way, we tried absolutely everything. We tried absolute monarchy, constitutional monarchy, republic, dictatorship, democracy with a king or not. So we've tried everything in terms of governments, and we end up in 2012 in a huge mess of debt. Now, why and how did it happen? This is something interesting, but as Hemingway said in his book, The Sun Never Rises, how did you become bankrupt? And he said, 2 ways, slowly and then suddenly. You do not build 350 billion of debt overnight. There has to be an evolutionary process. It has to be, it's a long process. It's like a compounding interest. You compound debt every year, little by little, and then all of a sudden, one day, you find out that the markets are shut. You'll no longer be able to refinance that debt, and then that's it. You're dead. So why did it happen? There are many theories. When I hear a lot of economists, and as I say, I'm not an economist, they always try to explain the Greek debt problem with respect to economic language, like, they've lost competitiveness, or they've lost exports, and things, but they never actually go back and answer the question why all of these things happened. And if you do look at the most perhaps important event in modern European or Greek European history is the fact that in 1981 Greece entered the European Union, and all of a sudden Greece was flooded with European subsidies, money for free, with no strings attached. Now, this money was used mainly by the politicians to get re-elected, because there were no strings attached. They could actually use them just like any good politician does. I mean, any politician wants to get re-elected, so they use these funds time and time again to get re-elected. The problem with that is that the prudent politicians were not getting re-elected because the ones that promised more and more money were able to deliver their promises. So we come to 2001 and Greece enters the European Union and the Eurozone, and it's able to borrow money even cheaper than, let's say, most of the other countries. I mean, Greece was borrowing with less than 0.5% over Germany for many, many years. And that fueled even more the debt of that country. It actually stopped making reforms. Politicians did not have to do any reforms. All they had to do is just borrow. I gave a lecture recently to a university here in the UK where I compared what is the cost of actually collecting taxes. Now, if you look at the cost of collecting taxes, sometimes it is 4 or 5%. In Greece, it's closer perhaps to 9 or 10%. Now, if you compare this cost to the actual cost of borrowing, you'll find out that it's actually much easier to borrow money than to collect taxes. And this is a problem that many other southern European countries face. And this is the root of the problem. There is no such thing as a gene for avoiding taxes. People avoid taxes not only because the state allows them, but because they actually adapt to the economic environment.
Now, you're just back from Athens, and you attended a lecture that was given by Nouriel Roubini regarding the potential for default. Is there any workable solution?
Well, there are many workable solutions. The one thing for sure is that exiting the euro, it's like and printing your own currency like the Greek drachma. It's like saying to someone that you better commit suicide because then there is hope that you will be resurrected. And as far as I'm concerned, this happened about 2,000 years ago and not since. So to actually say to someone, oh, you better commit suicide and then come back into life is not a viable solution. It's not a trading strategy. So in my mind, yes, Greece has to stay inside the euro and try and do the many structural reforms that they need to do. And yes, there would be more restructurings and more debt relief in the years to come, because even with that deal that was struck a few weeks ago, the PSI, it would not be enough. But what is important is for Greece to rejoin the European Union, because even though it is in the European Union, it's only in the name. They have not done anything other than joining in and getting the money. So they have to rejoin the European family.
Well, we're just getting started, and I do want to come back and talk with you again soon, because this is very, very enlightening for us. And I also want to suggest that our listeners visit your incredible website, Blogspot, and the address is andreaskoutras.blogspot.com, and that's spelled AndreasKoutras.blogspot.com. So, Andreas, have a great weekend, and thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.